While traveling through Kentucky recently, we took advantage of our Harvest Host membership to spend the night at Casey Jones Distillery, and we had a really good time here.
Casey Jones Distillery is in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and it's made the moonshine that they make here is made with the family recipe that the owner's grandfather used when he had his still in the woods.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more legit now than it used to be, but it's still using the family recipe, and it's really good.
Yeah, we had a chance to go on the tour and do a little tasting, but we also got to talk to AJ himself and learn about the history of not just the distillery here, but the family history of his grandfather and, all the trials and tribulations of making moonshine in the woods.
This is all about bringing back what my grandfather had a history for and was known for. Very popular in this part of the country for making stills and moonshine. And matter of fact, his real name was Alfred. Just like me, we've got other names we want to be called by. His real name was Alfred Jones. He got the nickname Casey Jones from the fact that he would only sell his moonshine by the case. So if you bought from him, you weren't going to be able to buy a mason jar and come back the next day, get another mason jar. You had to buy 4 gallons of moonshine at one time. He thought that was maybe one way too, that the government would not know, the feds wouldn't know who Casey Jones was, I thought it'd keep him out of prison, but it didn't work too well for him. He spent a couple of different times there in prison for it. But so what we did, we kind of brought all this back to life. Casey, back in 1967, the federal government asked Casey to build a still for the visitor center at Land Between the Lakes. They wanted to showcase the history there, and they would pay him to build a still for the visitor center if they could keep his name on all the stuff. So he agreed to do that. So we have the last still. We have that still here at the distillery. What happened was the TVA was in control of that Land Between the Lakes area, and the forestry department took over about 15, 16 years ago. And when they did, they came in and changed out the displays, and they put a model still of Casey's in and took the big still out. We found out pretty quick that it was missing, and we started asking what happened to it, and eventually we found out it was in a storage building. So we was afraid that it was going to get scrapped for copper, or somebody's going to steal it, or somebody's going to take it home. So we started requesting what would it take to get it back to the family. It took a year back and forth, and I got a call one day that said, hey, if you want your granddad still, we feel like it should probably be at your place, so come and get it. So that's what I did. Did a little bit of patchwork to it where it got damaged, and was experimenting around with it, and my wife decided I was going to get us both in trouble. So that's when we went after our license, and it took us a couple of years to make everything come together. But in 2014, November the 1st, we ran our very first legal batch of moonshine here. I built this still sitting behind me off of the design of Casey's still. And I'll tell this depending on who's here, because sometimes my grandson's here, sometimes my granddaughters are here. I'll say building this still, and the first time I fired it up was almost as good as having that first or second child, depending on which one. Because I've been working on it for a while. It's a test. I didn't have the skills that Casey had. I didn't have him here to guide me. I had one to go by. And so when I fired it the first time and everything worked right, I was tickled to death. Casey, like I say, was known for his moonshine. So the very first product we did was after Casey, and of course Casey's on the bottle. So he's on just about every bottle we do in some kind of form, except for when you get to the bourbon. And this is kind of my baby. Because Casey never did bourbon, but he did a barrel-aged product, which we do. They're barrel cut, very popular. But we're also now in the bourbon business, and very popular. We have a 1-year white label. We have a 2-year black label. People seem to really enjoy it. So now we're going on, our almost soon be 7th year in November. And we've kind of grown every year. We've been through the eclipse 2017. We've been through the pandemic last year. We converted over and shipped, sanitizer all over the country, and still do today. So we're now finally getting back, concentrating more on the distillery and bourbon. We're trying to repeat history, not be some kind of big modern distillery. And we mash in 55-gallon drums and ferment, and we use the the same yeast my grandfather used. We're able to get that. We buy corn from the same place he did, and so we're trying to repeat a lot of things. And then the other thing about this type of still, it is known for putting out a very good product. It's a square pot. You don't see them this shape anywhere. You'll see some that people have used in the past that have been copied off of my grandfather's designs. You'll see some out there pretty bad craftsmanship, but on it. But it designed to spread it out and so that you could build a fire all underneath it. And when you did that, you could heat it up faster. And then you'll see here, it makes it more rigid because it's squared and had pleated seams and the way it is. So they could set this over a fire and it heat up really quick. 3 pieces, lead arm, and then the condenser, and you could take it apart. The handles, you could pack it in and out of the woods and set it up. So you could run really fast. So this still produces a gallon about every 3.5 to 4 minutes. So it depends on how well the mash fermented and how fast it will actually run.
If somebody hasn't had moonshine, how would you describe what kind of alcohol or what kind of taste it is?
Well, I mean, it's kind of maybe a little bit similar to tequila. Maybe it's a clear liquid, but it has more corn taste to it. You're going to taste more corn when you at least with our product, you're going to taste more corn. Some people have had bad experience with moonshines that weren't very good and so forth, but with our product, we hear it all the time. Some of the best moonshine they've ever tasted. And we'll stack it up against anybody.
What would your grandfather think? Like, they did all this stuff illegally in the woods for so long, right? And now it's a business. So
he'd probably think I was crazy, because he got in a lot of trouble for that. My dad's sisters, there's been a couple of them, actually 3 of them that came. It was really neat for them to see something like this working and their dad on the bottle, after all the troubles that he went through 2 different times in federal pen for it. Of course, they couldn't talk about it when they were kids. They couldn't say anything about all the stuff that they experienced with it too. But I can tell you, they ground a lot of corn. Yeah, they ground a lot of corn. It's got to be ground. So they had to do a lot of work when it comes to all this stuff like this.
And I noticed you've added some flavors to it: peach, apple.
Mhm.
Now, is that something that? Where did that idea come from, or what? How did you choose the flavors?
My granddad and dad and them, when I was a kid growing up, we used to make homemade muscadine wine, and the muscadines grow in the wild here. So they also did some muscadine shine, where they added the muscadine flavors to it, and then they added some peaches and apples at different times. They would cut up the whole fruit and then just let their shine soak in it. We actually use a juice that we get that's pasteurized, so trying to make the process, as safe as possible can be, and then we actually do a blending process for our flavored products. So,
but they just drop the fruit right in.
Drop the fruit right in. Yeah.
So we want to give a big thank you to AJ and his wife Peg for not only just having the distillery here, which is really cool, but for being part of the Harvest Host program, because it does allow travelers to get a little more, I say, intimate with the local businesses and be able to spend the night and spend a little bit more time than you would if you were just stopping by for the regular distillery tour.
For those who aren't familiar, Harvest Host is a program where it's an annual fee and you join the membership, and then it opens up the door to all kinds of places across the country. And that it's distilleries, it's wineries, there's farms, there's museums,
golf courses.
There's a golf course feature that you can add on. There's just a ton of places that you can stay, all for the annual fee. And then it's a free overnight as long as they have space for you.
Free.
It's free because generally they ask you to, if you can, to participate in some way by maybe buying a product, that kind of thing. And we've never had a problem with that. So our free nights at Harvest Host tend to add up pretty quickly because we'll find a great moonshine distillery and want to stock up, or there's a winery. But that's a part of the program. And I think that's a great way to, it's not just about spending the money there, but we're able to find places that otherwise we never would have found. We never would have driven to Hopkinsville, Kentucky and found this little distillery, which is great, if it hadn't been for the Harvest Host program.
Well, we might have in this case because it is on part of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which we've always wanted to do. But in this case, we were able to go on the tasting and experience that without having to worry about driving somewhere afterward, too. And so we could just stay put here. But there's also I know there's some working farms. I know there's one in Michigan, Mooville, where it's the ice cream manufacturer, so that's a good one because you get ice cream, and that's well worth buying and staying. So, we really do like the Harvest Host member program just because it does get us places that we probably wouldn't have otherwise.
We are affiliates for Harvest Host. So I will put a link in the description where you can click on that, find out more about Harvest Host, and you get a discount if you go through our link. So that's handy. And it gives you an opportunity to check out places like this.
Yeah, Casey Jones has been a really great treat, and I know that there are more out there like them. So whether you are checking out Casey Jones or you're checking out one of the other ones, just try it out. Whether it's the Harvest Host membership or it's just visiting these, local off the beaten path places. We really encourage you to get out there.
Find some place that's a little different, get out and enjoy it. Keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there.